was never someone who believed in urban legends. To me, they were just stories invented to scare people. That was until the summer of 2019 when my life changed forever. Today, after much hesitation, I decided to share my story with you. It all started with an invitation to a party in the middle of nowhere. A get-together with longtime friends, all eager to reminisce about the old days and escape everyday drama. The chosen spot was Jonas's cabin, a country house situated at the edge of the Whispering Forest. The name of the forest already evoked some discomfort, but no one seemed to care. It was vacation, after all, and everyone wanted to relax and have fun. We arrived at the cabin at sunset. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. The cabin seemed charming at first glance, despite being slightly weathered by time. However, the forest nearby had a more sinister appearance. The trees were dense, with twisted branches like hands trying to grab anything that passed by. The first night was filled with laughter, drinking, and nostalgia. There was no cell signal there, which, although inconvenient, also forced us to disconnect and really enjoy each other's company. The full moon illuminated the night, and it was only after midnight that the first sign that something was wrong appeared. While everyone was around the campfire, we heard a strange sound coming from the forest. It was a whisper. Something low, almost inaudible, but unmistakable. It sounded like a muffled argument. We looked at each other, nervously laughing. Someone suggested it must be the wind passing through the trees, but deep down, we all knew it wasn't just that. Curious and a bit daring due to the alcohol, we decided to investigate. Armed with flashlights, we ventured to the edge of the forest. The air felt cooler there, the whispers clearer. "Go back," they said. "You are not welcome." Jonas, always the bravest among us, insisted it was just our imagination, but even he seemed less confident than usual. We decided to return to the cabin, still laughing at what we called group hallucinations. It was on the second night that Jonas began to behave strangely. He spent the entire day nervous, peering through the cabin window at the forest as if expecting to see something or someone. When questioned, he just shook his head and tried to change the subject. After one of my friends, Alex, found him whispering to himself in the bathroom, we decided it was time to confront him. He revealed that there was a secret about the cabin that he had never told us. According to his grandfather's old story, the forest housed something ancient and evil, and no one should enter the Whispering Forest after dark. On the third night, Alex disappeared. We searched the entire cabin and surrounding area, calling his name, but all we found was the silent forest and the constant whispers. It was then that we realized the whispers were not random. They called our names, one by one, incessantly. Jonas, Leah, Pedro. All were summoned by the voice in the darkness. We felt a profound fear. The situation quickly turned into a nightmare. We tried calling the police, but as usual, there was no signal. The idea of leaving the forest at night and attempting to walk back to the town was terrifying, especially since we noticed that Alex's car had disappeared along with him. On the fourth night, I woke up to scratching sounds coming from outside the window. I looked, and in the reflection, I noticed something among the trees. It was hard to focus on, as if the forest itself was alive and moving. When I finally fixed my gaze, I saw a skeletal human outline, watching from afar. Days passed in a blur of terror. Jonas began whispering incomprehensible things, Leah cried all the time, and Pedro, always the most skeptical, locked himself in his room, refusing to come out. Whatever was in the forest knew we were weakening, our sanity shredded like autumn leaves to the wind. Deciding I couldn't just do nothing, Armed with courage and a kitchen knife, I approached the forest at dusk. The whispers intensified, seeming to beg me to stop. Ignoring them, I ventured into the forest's darkness. As I advanced, the world around me transformed. The trees seemed to twist, the air grew heavy and cold, and the whispers now sounded like muffled screams. Suddenly, a clearing opened before me. In the center, an ancient, decayed cabin stood. I entered, hoping to find something, anything to explain what was happening. Inside, the house was adorned with strange symbols, and in the center of the room, an old book. When I opened it, I understood. The Whispering Forest was a seal, an ancient prison for evil spirits. At the moment, I believed Jonas knew this, and that's why he brought us here. He didn't want to tell us because he feared for everyone's safety, or perhaps he was in danger himself and needed to perform some unknown ritual to keep them contained. As I left the cabin, I encountered Alex, or what was left of him. He stood there, eyes vacant and skin pale, as if his life had been drained. He whispered in a hoarse voice, "Free us." I ran back to Jonas's cabin, almost tripping with every step, feeling the horrid sensation of being pursued. Upon arriving, I saw Jonas in a trance, drawing the same symbols I had seen in the old cabin. We tried to stop him, but something within him was determined. Finally, he revealed the truth. He had made a pact to bring people to the forest in exchange for wealth and power, but now the price was becoming unbearable. With the little sanity I had left, I joined forces with Leah and Pedro to stop Jonas. As we confronted him, the cabin door exploded with a cold wind, shadows took form, and the spirits began to appear. Chaos ensued immediately. Lights flickered, screams filled the air, and Jonas started floating, his eyes glowing an ethereal blue. We realized that the only way to stop this would be to break the circle he was drawing. Pedro, being the strongest physically, managed to disrupt a part of it, causing an explosion of light that threw us all back. The ground trembled, and for a moment, the world seemed to freeze. When the spirits vanished, we realized that time had returned to normal. Jonas, now a broken man, cried on the floor, regretful. We grabbed what we could and ran out of the forest before anything else could stop us. At dawn, we finally got a cell signal and called for help. The police never found the old cabin I mentioned. The site of the clearing was empty, and none of the symbols or the book were found. The story was wrapped up as collective hysteria, a misunderstanding fueled by isolation and stress. I came out of this experience with a new reverence for what we can't explain. I'm sharing this story not to scare you, but to warn you. Not all stories are just tales. Sometimes, there are things lurking in the dark, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. And if you ever hear whispers in a forest at night, my advice is simple: run.
It was a quiet October afternoon when I received an unexpected invitation from a childhood friend I hadn't seen in years. The invitation seemed suspicious to me, as it mentioned a cabin in a deep forest, a place that, according to him, would provide us with unforgettable days of tranquility and reconnection with nature. Being a born adventurer and lover of horror stories, I couldn't resist and promptly accepted. A week later, there I was, traveling through winding, deserted roads, surrounded by a dense forest that seemed to have come straight out of a horror tale. The GPS in my car began to fail, showing only a vague position and suggesting that I was off route. However, my friend's instructions were clear, and I kept driving, following a trail that narrowed more and more as I advanced. After what felt like hours, I spotted the entrance to a dirt road that led into the forest. An old wooden sign, barely visible under the dim evening light, indicated "abandoned cabin." That should have been enough for any sensible person to turn back, but the adventurous and curious spirit I carry raised its flag, and I continued onwards. After a few minutes, I finally arrived at the cabin. It was an old structure, made of dark wood, partially covered with moss and foliage. The windows were broken in various places, and the front door creaked at the slightest touch. I entered, a shiver ran down my spine as I felt the temperature drop abruptly. The interior of the cabin was simple and rustic, but it carried a heavy aura that seemed to permeate the air. I walked around the place and realized I was alone. My friend wasn't there, and there was no sign that anyone had set foot in that place for a long time. I found it strange, but assuming he would arrive later, I decided to settle in. I opened one of the suitcases and pulled out a flashlight, as electricity was clearly not an option there. The flashlight's beam began to dance through the shadows of the place, creating unsettling movements on the corroded wooden walls. Night fell quickly, and darkness took over the room, except for the pale light of the flashlight. Outside, I heard the sound of something moving, heavy footsteps that broke branches and leaves under their weight. I looked out the window but could see nothing but darkness and the grotesque shadows of trees swaying in the wind. I decided to prepare for sleep, believing it was all just my imagination. That night, the silence was broken by whispers and murmurs. Indistinct voices seemed to echo through the cabin's walls, mixing with moans and horrifyingly childlike laughter. I got up scared, pointing the flashlight to every corner, but found no one. My back was cold with sweat, and my heart pounded in my throat, but I convinced myself that I was just tired and that my mind was playing tricks. On my way back to bed, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A pale, skeletal figure moved slowly in the dark hallway. When I shone the flashlight, there was nothing there, only the dark void. I decided to take a closer look. Each step seemed to echo in an endless tunnel. And then I saw a door I didn't remember seeing before. It was a basement door, semi-covered with a layer of dust and cobwebs. With considerable effort, I pulled the door, which opened with a disturbing sound of rusty hinges, revealing a flight of stairs that descended into an even denser gloom. My flashlight shook slightly in my hands as I descended the stairs. The air there was denser, colder, laden with a musty, mildewed aroma. Reaching the bottom, I realized I was in a type of basement, but it wasn't ordinary. I didn't feel alone down there. The environment seemed alive, pulsating with an ancient and malevolent energy. In the center of the basement, I saw a ritualistic circle drawn on the floor with symbols I didn't recognize. There were melted candles, small bones, perhaps from small animals, but the most disturbing were the drawings on the walls. They depicted human figures in agony, faces distorted by fear and pain, and the shadow of an indescribable creature, coldly watching. While examining the place, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. I quickly turned the flashlight, but no one was there. However, the whispers began to gain strength, as if 1,000 hungry voices were trying to penetrate my mind. The feeling of suffocation increased, my heart raced, and suddenly I felt a sharp blow to my head. Everything went dark. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but when I woke up, I was lying on the basement floor. The flashlight, miraculously, was still on beside me. I got up with difficulty, my head throbbed, and a metallic taste of blood permeated my mouth. I looked around, trying to regain my senses when I saw something deeply disturbing. In one corner of the basement, a hooded figure watched me. Its face was shadowed, the eyes glowed like burning coals. Before I could react, the figure vanished, leaving behind a trail of darkness and deep fear. Now, I knew I was not alone there and that something or someone had been playing with me from the beginning. I quickly climbed the stairs, deciding it was time to leave that cursed cabin. Opening the cabin door, I was confronted by an even more terrifying presence. The creature I had drawn on the walls was now before me, its form a schizophrenic mix of shadows and decaying flesh. Its penetrating eyes observed me with overwhelming hunger. I ran down the trail, my breath was irregular, and branches whipped my face. I didn't stop until I reached the car, collapsed into the seat, and frantically started the engine. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the creature at the cabin's entrance, its distorted form slowly vanishing into the night fog. I didn't tell anyone about this experience for many years. I returned to my daily life, blocking the memory of that dark event. However, every night, when I close my eyes, I still hear the whispers of the cabin, the childlike laughter, and see the penetrating eyes of that indescribable being. This is the burden I carry since then, knowing that somewhere, in that forgotten cabin in the deep forest, something evil still watches me, waiting for the next victim. This was just one of the stories that I will still bring here on the channel. That's why your subscription with the bell activated is very important, so you will be notified when a new video comes out. That's it. See you in the next video.